Red cards, shootouts, comebacks, and hometown heartbreak. The quarterfinals of the Women's Euros had it all, as 8 became 4, with the late night spent watching this being worth it and then some. Welcome back to Meet My Pathion, and today we will recap all of the action that took place in the latest round of fixtures happening in the 2025 Women's Euros tournament in Switzerland. The quarterfinals kicked off with a war of attrition between Norway and Italy, and it eventually became evident that the match would come down to whose defense would weather the storm the best. And from this point of view, Norway were always hanging off the edge, as their defense came in for a hard time against the offensive pressure of the Azzurre, who came close to rippling the net time and again, with the likes of Cantore and Caruso ever the live wire, but weren't so lucky in the first half. The second half would prove to be far more salient for the Italians, whose front-footed approach finally yielded them a well-deserved goal, with Girelli sweeping the ball into the back of the net, with the Norwegian defense being left scrambling. And speaking of scrambling, Norway would soon do the same thing, with Linari conceding a penalty that Hegerberg, thankfully for Italy, would miss to keep the Italians ahead. However, it would not be for long before Hegerberg would finally redeem herself to finally bring her nation back into the game. And as the clock wound down, both teams gave it their all to try and gain the advantage, and ultimately it would be the worthy winners in Italy who would snatch victory with none other than Girelli again heading home from across to seal Italy's passage in the semi-finals, deservedly so. Whereas for Norway, magic could not be found for Gemma Granger nor her side to get them through to the next round. And honestly, it's for the best, because Norway's defensive frailties were always on display in the group stages, and it was pretty much very obvious that they were always going to be exposed sooner rather than later, and now that they have been exposed as so, they have the chance to work on those frailties and hopefully come back better as a result come the next tournament. Sweden and England were up next to see who would be next to punch their ticket into the semis, with the promise of entertainment being upheld by both sides and then some, with it actually taking less than 2 minutes before the first goal of the game was scored by Sweden captain Kosovare Asllani, who, with the help from Stina Blackstenius, capitalized on England's faulty build-up from the back to stun the holders early on. And shock would soon turn into panic, as just 20 minutes later, Sweden would score again, but this time with a vicious solo charge by Blackstenius, who shielded off any and all pressure coming her way to slot the ball into the net with finesse to give her side a solid buffer and a great advantage heading into the second half. And it would appear that whatever halftime talk occurred in the Lionesses camp worked, because come the final 45, England were looking like a different team. It was night and day, and they knew that they were the better team that they always were. And Sweden finally had some competition in this match, and their spot on the semis wasn't so guaranteed anymore. With the match eventually winding down and the time ticking over, both teams were looking for a goal to settle it and make sure things went in their respective favors. And the addition of substitutes would eventually help to sway the tide in favor of England, who in the space of just 2 minutes sucker punched the Swedes, with Chloe Kelly masterminding the comeback that saw Lucy Bronze and Michelle Agyemang find the back of the net to draw England level and eventually take the game into extra time. And not even 30 extra minutes of playing could separate the two sides, with tired legs and minds grinding it all into a churn that meant that penalties would be needed to settle the matter once and for all. Reflecting upon it, the shootout was a great encapsulation of this match as a whole, with England ultimately outgunning Sweden by 3-2 in the shootout to seal their passage to the semis, which was emblematic of how a result may seem at one point in a game. It's truly never over till the final whistle, with England's perseverance and tactical shifts proving vital in helping them turn things around and advance. Whilst for Sweden, arguably the best team at the Euros to this point, they will rue their luck and their missed opportunity, because in all fairness, they did not put a single foot wrong in this game and throughout their group campaign stage for that matter, and really should have gotten a result, but their inability to continuously punish England in the same vein that they did to Germany not so long ago ultimately allowed for the opponents to stay in the game and get the result at their expense. Spain and Switzerland locked up next with an eye on the prize of the penultimate semi-final spot. And as you'd expect, the world champions were on top of things early on and sustained an extensive amount of pressure that really should have yielded a goal or two. However, Switzerland would not allow them to have an easy way of things, and to their credit, the hosts set themselves up incredibly well to take the sting out of Spain's punches as much as possible, with every passing lane, every shot attempt, and everything in between being disrupted and blocked as much as possible. And to a large extent, Switzerland were largely successful in carrying this approach out. Not even a conceded penalty by Ryerson was enough to see Spain take a deserving lead, with Caldente whiffing her spot kick, and moments like this would only buoy Switzerland's prospects to potentially do something akin to causing an upset. Though their moments were fleeting, Switzerland did manage to cause a few headaches for the Spanish backline, with Reuteler and Schottenleib especially nearly daring to dream and potentially send the crowd into a frenzy. But come the halftime whistle, there would be a much needed reprieve for the tournament hosts, who despite their promise was still under heavy fire from the world champions despite the scoreline still being 0-0. And speaking of the latter, Spain continued to chip and ip away again and again against the stubbornly rigid Swiss, who were still well and truly good for their money, but were still struggling to make something out of themselves in the opposition box. This fictitious encounter continued to rage on, even with the advent of substitutes, and finally, the perseverance of the Spaniards would yield the long overdue goal they needed, with Del Castillo coming in again and firing home at the first time of asking. The next net buster would be equal parts mesmerizing and controversial, with Claudia Pina scoring an insanely gorgeous golazo against the run of play to give Spain the buffer, with the controversy stemming from the fact that Swiss captain Volti was being held up by Guijarro in the lead up to Pina stealing the ball and scoring, which oddly took place in close proximity to the referee, who was turned away from the situation, and unfortunately for Volti and her side, the goal would stand. And the pain, suffering, and misery would only continue till the very end for the Swiss, who not only concede another penalty, which was saved emphatically by Peng, but would also go a player down literally in the final seconds of the game, after Noel Meritz denied a goal-scoring opportunity for Spain's Parajuelo to accentuate arguably the worst of what had been generally a valiant effort from Switzerland, who poured their entire hearts and souls not only into this match but into the Euros campaign as a whole. And it can be argued that they didn't do their nation proud, especially with this defiant performance against the world champions. And for Spain, what else can be said apart from it's Spain? The world champions continued to be worth their pedigree, and besides the headache posed by Switzerland, the result was never in doubt for them, and as a result, Spain have booked their spot into the semis. The final quarter-final encounter between France and Germany will live long in the memory because it had just about everything you'd want from a sporting spectacle, ranging from drama, controversy, tension, goals, cards, and even VR intervention amongst many other things. The Germans were in pretty rough shape already heading into this encounter, coming off the back of their hiding at the hands of Sweden, and they would not fare any better in this crunch clash with France, as the Mannschaft would quickly be reduced to 10 women after Catherine Hendrick was sent off for literally snatching Grecian box braids in a bid to prevent a goal-scoring opportunity. And of all the places to pull such a stunt, no pun intended, Hendrick did it in the box, so suffice to say, France won a penalty which was promptly dispatched by Berger despite Berger getting a hand to it. With the French a goal and player up, it would have been expected for them to continue on and get some more goals, as has been emblematic of their Euros performances so far, but you'd have been wrong this time around, because it would be Germany that were next to score, with a sensational header into the net from Nuskin that was so good that France's De Almeida had to dab in recognition. With the neutral status quo being restored, German hopes and French frustrations were spilling over, and this only served to open up the game some more, and opportunities galore came in from both ends, which gave us one of the best goalkeeping displays from Anne-Catherine Berger, who would not allow for her net to be rippled, albeit from one moment early on in the second half, where VR intervention denied a great attacking play that ended in a great but ultimately ruled out goal from Guerrero. On the other end of the spectrum, Germany were causing a fair few headaches for their opponents, and Jule Brand in particular was relishing menacing the French backline to the point that Salma Bache had no choice but to draw a penalty for bringing the former down in the box. Hero of the first half, Nuskin would step up once more to be her side's North Star, but French goalie Perrault Mignon had other ideas as she skillfully deflected the spot kick to keep the game tied till the very end of normal time. And come extra time, The final 30 minutes regulation were a celebration of the art of goalkeeping, with Berger again coming to the spotlight and single-handedly keeping her team alive, who at this point were running on fumes, but thankfully had the vet in between the sticks guiding them with a range of great saves, with the highlight inarguably being her scoop save from teammate Ming's scuffed clearance that would have surely seen France go through had it gone past the line. Once the dust had settled, penalties were needed once more to determine who would go through, and as was emblematic in the England vs Sweden game, this shootout did well to encapsulate the nature of the 120 minutes that had preceded France and Germany, in that it's never truly over till the final whistle goes, because Germany came up trumps to narrowly beat out France 6-5 in the shootout to secure their passage into the semi-finals, with Anne-Catherine Berger again being rightfully hailed as the hero of the night for her nation, with a memorably clutch performance even in the shootouts that will live well and long in the minds and hearts of her nation's supporters. And for Leibler, missed opportunities being rude will be the order of the day for France, as once again they have come up short at a major tournament, with this one particularly being one that will sting for them given how well they performed up until this point. Nothing though can be taken away from them and their efforts, and whilst it will undoubtedly hurt for the nation as a whole, I think a lot of reprieve can be taken from the fact that they went up against some of the best competition around early on and came out of it victorious. So there is definitely more than enough to build off of come the next major tournament that France will participate in. With the quarterfinals being done and dusted, only 4 teams now remain, and England will continue their defense of their crown against Italy, and most eyes will undoubtedly be on Spain's clash with Germany in the other semi-final bracket, and because of that, Tuesday and Wednesday cannot come soon enough. What are your thoughts on the quarterfinal round so far played at the Euros, and who are you backing to make the final? Leave your thoughts on this and anything else in the comment section below, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.